Today, we dive into a controversial statement that has once again placed former U.S. President Donald Trump at the center of global headlines. In a recent post, Trump referred to Chicago as the most dangerous city in the world. The claim is bold, provocative, and for many, questionable. But for Trump, it reflects his long-standing criticism of American cities, their leadership, and the ongoing issues of crime and violence that continue to plague them. To really understand the weight of this statement, we need to break down what Trump meant, why he chose Chicago, and how such comments play into the larger political and cultural debates, both in the United States and globally. Chicago has long been a city that carries both glory and struggle. Known for its rich history, architectural wonders, cultural diversity, and contributions to music and sports, it is equally recognized for its struggles with gun violence, poverty, and inequality. For years, statistics have shown that Chicago suffers from higher-than-average rates of violent crime compared to many other American cities. However, the claim that it is the most dangerous city in the entire world is something that requires careful unpacking. Cities in regions affected by war, political instability, and extreme poverty often face levels of violence and insecurity that far surpass Chicago. But Trump's statement was not just about raw statistics. It was political theater aimed at drawing attention, shaping narratives, and stirring emotions. When we examine why Trump chose Chicago, we see that it has long been one of his favorite examples when criticizing Democratic leadership. Chicago has been run by Democratic mayors for decades, and in Trump's rhetoric, that becomes symbolic of his larger argument that Democratic policies fail to ensure safety and prosperity for citizens. He has used Chicago repeatedly as evidence when arguing for stricter policing, stronger law enforcement, and harsher penalties for criminals. The narrative he presents is simple. Under liberal leadership, cities fall into chaos, crime surges, and ordinary people suffer. Whether one agrees or disagrees, it is undeniable that this kind of language resonates with many of his supporters who are frustrated with rising crime in their own communities. But how accurate is the description of Chicago as the most dangerous city worldwide? Statistically, it is not. There are cities across Latin America, Africa, and parts of Asia where homicide rates are significantly higher. Cities in countries experiencing armed conflict or widespread instability see violence on a daily scale that far exceeds what Chicago faces. Yet Trump's choice of words is not about statistical accuracy, but about painting an image. He wants his audience to imagine Chicago as a failed experiment in leadership and governance. By using the term most dangerous city in the world, he dramatizes the issue in a way that forces people to pay attention. For Muslims, especially those living in the United States and Chicago itself, statements like this have layered consequences. Chicago is home to one of the largest Muslim communities in America, with vibrant neighborhoods, mosques, businesses, and cultural centers. Muslims contribute heavily to the city's economy, social services, and education. They are doctors, teachers, entrepreneurs, and activists who work daily to uplift their communities and help reduce violence. When a city is painted as lawless or chaotic, it can unfairly overshadow the positive contributions of the people who live there, including Muslims who are striving to build peace and opportunity. At the same time, Muslims, like many other communities, have been victims of the same violence that Trump is criticizing. Families have lost loved ones to gun crime. Businesses have been impacted, and children have grown up in environments where safety is not always guaranteed. So while the rhetoric may sound like an attack, it also highlights issues that Muslim communities are actively engaged in solving. To understand why violence persists in Chicago, we must look beyond politics and slogans. The reality is complex. Much of the violence is rooted in systemic inequality, economic deprivation, and lack of access to quality education and health care. Communities that experience persistent poverty often see higher crime rates, not because of inherent flaws in the people, but because of structural barriers that limit opportunities. When young people do not see clear paths to success, when jobs are scarce, and when schools are underfunded, Cycles of crime become harder to break. Guns are widely available in the United States, and illegal trafficking of firearms fuels the violence further. These are issues that require long-term investment, smart policymaking, and community-based solutions. Chicago's Muslim organizations have been at the forefront of addressing some of these problems. Community leaders have launched programs to mentor youth, provide after-school activities, and create safe spaces for dialogue and growth. Mosques and Islamic centers often double as community hubs where people find not only spiritual guidance, but also practical support like tutoring, job training, and counseling. Muslim doctors and volunteers provide healthcare services in underserved neighborhoods. Charitable efforts by Muslim groups during Ramadan, Eid, and throughout the year distribute food, clothing, and aid to struggling families. These efforts may not always make the headlines, but they are crucial in building resilience and hope in neighborhoods affected by crime. The challenge with statements like Trump's is that they focus attention only on the problem, not the solutions. Labeling Chicago the most dangerous city worldwide may make for a powerful headline, but it does not acknowledge the resilience of the people who live there or the work being done to make the city safer. It also risks stigmatizing the city in the eyes of outsiders, discouraging investment, tourism, and opportunities. When a city is branded negatively, it can impact everything from property values to the confidence of its residents. For Muslims and other minority communities who are already battling stereotypes, this kind of rhetoric can compound the struggle. Still, there is value in using moments like this to spark serious conversations. If Trump's words bring attention to the urgent need for reducing violence in Chicago, then perhaps they can be used constructively. The key is to shift from blame to solutions. What would it take to truly reduce violence in Chicago? Stronger community policing that builds trust rather than fear, investment in schools that give children pathways to achievement, economic development that creates jobs in struggling neighborhoods, and reforms that address systemic inequalities. These are not quick fixes, but they are necessary steps if the city wants to shed its reputation for violence. Internationally, Trump's statement also shapes perceptions of America as a whole. When a former president describes one of the country's major cities as the most dangerous in the world, it projects an image of instability. Around the globe, people already see America as a place of contradictions, immense wealth and opportunity on one hand, and social division and violence on the other. For Muslims abroad, especially in countries where America's image is already contested, such statements reinforce the idea that the U.S. is struggling to manage its own problems even as it positions itself as a leader on the world stage. This can create space for dialogue about shared struggles because issues of crime, inequality, and governance are not unique to the United States. One important point to remember is that crime does not define an entire city. Chicago, despite its struggles, remains a city of immense culture, opportunity, and resilience. Its skyline, universities, arts, and food culture attract millions every year. Its sports teams inspire passion across generations. Its history is filled with innovation, creativity, and progress, and its communities, including Muslims, continue to fight for a better future. Reducing Chicago to a label of most dangerous city worldwide does a disservice to the complexity and richness of the city's identity. For Trump, however, the politics of simplicity works. His audience responds to bold, clear, emotionally charged language. Saying Chicago has challenges does not make headlines. Saying it is the most dangerous city worldwide does. This approach reflects a broader style of communication, where exaggeration and confrontation are tools for shaping public opinion. For his supporters, it confirms their belief that America is in decline and that strong leadership is needed to restore order. For his critics, it is an example of irresponsible rhetoric that overshadows real solutions. The debate around crime in Chicago also touches on deeper issues of race and representation. Many of the neighborhoods most affected by violence are predominantly African American or Latino. Discussions about crime can easily slip into stereotypes and stigmatization of these communities. Muslims, too, understand the pain of being stereotyped, of having an entire group judged by the actions of a few. This is why it is important to separate the problem of crime from the identity of the communities who live in those neighborhoods. Crime is not a reflection of race or religion. It is a reflection of social conditions, policies, and systemic failures. By favoring Muslims in this conversation, it means recognizing their role not just as passive residents of Chicago, but as active agents of change. Muslims are not on the sidelines watching violence unfold. They are directly engaged in the fight against it. They are mentors, educators, health professionals, and community leaders who work tirelessly to build safer neighborhoods. Highlighting their contributions not only tells a fuller story, but it also challenges the negative narratives that sometimes dominate media discussions about Muslims in America. Ultimately, Trump's declaration is less about Chicago itself and more about the kind of story he wants to tell about America. By painting the city in such stark terms, he signals that the country is in crisis and that bold action is needed. Whether or not one agrees with his framing, the issues he points to are real. People in Chicago, including Muslims, do live with the daily reality of violence, and they deserve solutions that go beyond political slogans.